Beef tallow, raw milk, influencer endorsements. Is this current carnivore wellness trend indicative of a societal shift away from vegan food and products? Or is it just a predictable pendulum swing, a trend of the moment that we'll be looking back at as that beef tallow phase in a few years? Or is there something even more orchestrated going on? Today, I and Vogue Business will do our best to get to the bottom of it.
I drink raw cream in my coffee every morning.
Once you start rubbing cow fat on your face, there's no going back.
You can't eat your skincare. You should not be putting it on your face.
This is beef tallow here. I'm obsessed with it.
I have tried 7 different beef tallow moisturizers. It's bad. Don't put beef tallow on your face.
Lead is natural, arsenic is natural, mercury is natural. We're not putting that on our face now, are we, ladies?
Do you remember last fall when I made a video discussing a women's health article about whether wellness had canceled veganism? If so, you may recall I felt that article didn't really do what it promised. While it led to a lot of interesting talking points like Lizzo's ex-vegan announcement and Kristen Bell's ex-vegetarian announcement, it left me wanting more because I kind of saw where they were trying to go with it, but it never quite got there. So when I stumbled upon this article in Vogue Business, I was super intrigued. I actually found it while researching for the December Good Vegan News and thought, well, it's not gonna work for that, but bookmarked it for future reading. And by bookmarked it, I mean kept the tab open for about a month and a half, and anytime I did a tab closeout to try to lessen my raging ADHD, convinced myself I needed to keep it there or I'd lose it forever. Anyone else hold on to their open tabs more tightly than Gollum clutching his precious? While making this video, I actually got a message from Google Chrome being like, do you want to organize these? Which, rude, kind of helpful, but rude. When Google Chrome is like, are you okay? You know it's probably time to close a few tabs. So let's get into the Vogue Business article. It's titled, "The Carnivore is Back. Are Vegan Brands Out? The Pendulum Has Swung and Animal Product Consumption is Trending in Wellness Spheres," and was written by Natasha Scott and Maliha Schwabe. It begins, the carnivore diet, beef tallow, sticks of butter, and raw milk. When did animal products re-enter the zeitgeist? In a TikTok shared with her 11 million followers, influencer Nara Smith is seen adding beef tallow and animal fat to her homemade moisturizer recipe. For anyone who doesn't know, and if you don't, I aspire to be as chronically offline as you, Nara is a TikTok famous influencer who makes content I would categorize as lobotomized Mormon tradwife cooking show. And I truly believe it's an act or some sort of character she puts on, at least I hope to God it is. She is a very talented and creative chef and content creator, and her videos are very popular. But again, it does fall in this sort of Mormon and tradwife category. There's a lot of interesting commentary and analysis about this genre of content online, which isn't really the point of today's video, but there are some definite crossovers between that style of content and what we're talking about today. In the TikTok the article's referring to, it's actually her husband Lucky who's making the beef tallow moisturizer, and the story is that he just ran out of his moisturizer but he didn't really like it, so he's making his own. Later in the video they both try the moisturizer and she claims they loved it. Well, there were a lot of the typical comments she always gets along the lines of like, you can't be serious, this is too much, they're just playing with us at this point. There were also quite a few comments of people wanting to try it for themselves and remarking how good Nara and Lucky's skin look. One thing about these two people is that they are both models. From what I understand, they were both like working high fashion models before TikTok fame. So it's safe to say these are genetically blessed people. I don't think beef tallow alone is responsible for their external beauty. It's like watching a Pantene Pro-V commercial and believing using this will get your hair to look like this. I really did believe that the vitamins would just drop onto my hair. What a disappointment. Back to the article. Brands like Remnant Beauty and Bella Nectar, both of which incorporate beef tallow in their products, have seen sales grow 134% and 400% year on year in the last 2 years respectively. According to influencer marketing platform Tracker, mentions of beef tallow skincare are up 180% this year over last, while mentions of raw and unpasteurized milk are up 59% during this same period. What I find interesting is that in the case of the Bella Nectar bomb and and in Lucky Smith's Tallow moisturizer. In addition to tallow, they both have plenty of plant-derived ingredients in them as well. You can see the Bella Nectar ingredients on screen, and in the case of Lucky Smith's, he added in squalene oil, jojoba oil, vitamin E oil, hyaluronic acid, and glycerin. Also, if you're wondering, what does beef tallow smell like? Does it have a smell? Does it smell like beef? Yes, apparently it does. And that may explain other ingredients being added in, especially essential oils, to try to offset that stench. But I'm sure there are also people who just don't care and proudly rock the eau de boeuf. Don't come at me for my pronunciation. My Duolingo bird is still very sad. Now, I do want to say beef tallow has apparently been used for various purposes, including cosmetics, for thousands of years. So it's not seemingly a new thing that the beef industry came up with to sell more products, but was there some input or incentive from the beef industry? Are they playing into this in any way? We're going to discuss that later. And of course, TikTok is like a trend incubator or pressure cooker. If a product goes viral on TikTok, it will likely sell out. And while Nara and Lucky Smith were not promoting one specific product, just them mentioning beef tallow in their video all but guarantees that searches for tallow, purchases of tallow, other videos about tallow are sure to skyrocket. However, hilariously, or perhaps horrifyingly, many people on TikTok are apparently unknowingly putting beef lard on their faces instead of tallow. To me, I'm like tallow, lard, tomato, like we're talking about beef fat either way at the end of the day. But it was mildly entertaining to read this article of this guy like sputtering over the differences, like, they think it's tallow, but it's lard, these idiots. There's also this great Sentient Media article that really calls into question many of the claims about tallow, including its efficacy and dermatological use, which I will link below. And I came across multiple skincare experts on TikTok, including a dermatologist, a double board certified plastic surgeon, all who were like, do not use beef tallow on your skin. But back to the Vogue article. Diets are also shifting. Consumers are now embracing meat and butter, with some eating steak up to twice a day. Okay, source? Like, this is such a vague statement. Some consumers are now eating vegan buffalo wings and kombucha at an alarming rate. Source, me. The carnivore diet is up 76.6% year-on-year on Google. TikTok has seen an increase of 198%. The diet was initially popularized by manosphere podcasters such as Andrew Huberman, but has since spread to online women's wellness content. Does anyone else find it interesting / weird that this trend started with these so-called manosphere podcasters, these sort of hairy, or sometimes not hairy, sort of burly, leathery men, and then seemingly jumped into the delicate women's beauty space? Two industries that at least superficially don't seem to have much in common. I guess, put more simply, the beef industry found a way to reach the dudes, and now they've found a way to reach the ladies. Why are consumers pivoting to animal products? The rise of simplicity, naturalism, and conservatism is a result of consumers on the one hand feeling overwhelmed and exhausted about their personal and ethical choices, and on the other increasingly distrusting institutions like modern medicine, the media, and the government, says Jessica DeFino, beauty critic and author. Now, this is just one person's opinion, but if this is true, do people not realize that the dairy industry, the beef industry are institutions? And that their marketing is partially funded and overseen by the government, and that their messaging is incorporated into media and advertising in non-transparent ways. And of course, a lot of people don't realize this because this isn't something that these industries are like shouting from the rooftops. They don't necessarily want people to know the machinations of how the marketing works. But I talk more about animal ag marketing and what is called checkoff programs in the Aubrey Plaza Got Milk video, so if you haven't seen that, check it out here. I also have a much shorter, more punchy, real version of that on my IG. I'll link that below. Furthermore, simplicity and naturalism are words that could easily be applied to plant-based products. Again, I'm sick of this widely accepted foregone conclusion that animal products equal simple, plant products equals processed, when the reality is either could be simple or highly processed. Are we forgetting about the essential part of animal agriculture where we kill the animal and call it processing? We've literally rebranded unaliving animals to processing to make it more palatable. But yes, regale us with more tales about how highly processed beans and lentils are. Regardless of the fact that this article was posted back in December, tallow continues to be a huge topic of conversation, as we can see from these recent results from the news tab. And as you can see, it's becoming a trend to not just use tallow in skincare, but increasingly to cook fries in. Really, world? We had one thing. Vegans had one thing when we went out to eat. Well, technically we had two things. We had salads, even if modified to within an inch of their lives to where it's basically just lettuce and tomato, but we had those, and we had fries. Well, not anymore. And I want to say, I know, so you can stop furiously typing your comment, that tallow has been used to fry things in for centuries, if not millennia. But let's not pretend that many restaurants in the US for the last, let's say, 50 years were using tallow to fry fries in. Believe it or not, actually it's very easy to believe, the first time I saw this was on the menu of the new restaurant of Chef Molly, formerly of Sage Kitchen in Los Angeles. If you don't know about the whole Sage controversy, I discussed it in a live stream last year, which you can watch here. But Chef Molly has a new farm in Texas called Sovereignty Ranch, and on it, a new restaurant called The Barn. And because I like looking at menus of restaurants I will never go to, I peeped at the menu out of a somewhat sinister curiosity. Sometimes it's fun to just peep and imagine how hungry I'd be leaving that restaurant. It's like a weird form of sadism. And I have to say, it would be a pretty bleak day being a vegan visiting Sovereignty Ranch and eating at The Barn. The only thing that might remotely be vegan is the buffalo cauliflower, one of the things Sage was known for, but I have a strong feeling she's somehow de-veganized it. Because I was sickened but not surprised to see that all the fries on the menu are tallow fries. So vegans, beware, they're coming for our fries. Really, this is something I've known for a while. Many places fry fries or home fries in animal fat. It's one of those things that you unfortunately always have to ask, and then the server will be like, yeah, they're fries, why wouldn't they be vegan? And they'll look at you like you're a level 10 moron, when really you're just a level 5 vegan who's been around the block enough times to know that restaurants will add animal ingredients into absolutely anything and everything, and you're like, could you just go check with the chef? And they come back and they're like, yeah, they're fried in duck fat. And you're like, yeah, I knew they were. Anyway, it's not just influencers behind the trend. It has been popularized by alternative medicine advocates such as Gwyneth Paltrow, and even right-wing US Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene and Trump's newly appointed Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., all of whom have been met with widespread criticism. I found this photo that had a side-by-side of Nara Smith and Dakota Fanning's character in the Netflix show The Perfect Couple, which I watched earlier this month when I was down bad with COVID, and since I was in a somewhat feverish state, I had forgotten about this little detail. But there's this scene with Dakota Fanning's character who is portrayed as this sort of nightmarishly bitchy Upper East Side housewife who is pregnant, laying by the pool talking to another character and rubbing this balm on her stomach, which she says is made from a tallow that's banned by the FDA and that it helps with stretch marks. And spoiler alert, if you don't want a spoiler for the show, fast forward maybe like 30 seconds, but I do not recommend the show because it's absolutely terrible. That beef tallow moisturizer ends up being a major plot point. So as this article mentioned, Gwyneth Paltrow, who's kind of seen as the queen of waspy wellness, this character on the show is definitely portrayed as someone who, you know, subscribes to the Goop newsletter and would buy anything Gwyneth recommended. Now, as far as I could find, Gwyneth Paltrow has not specifically talked about beef tallow. She has talked about raw milk, but again, this gave me pause. Like, why are they talking about beef tallow on this show? Is it just a reflection of the times, or is there some other sort of undisclosed partnership? Something I've learned making videos on the topic of veganism and meat and dairy influence over the last several years is that these trends are usually not accidental or as organic as they would seem. And that's the misleading nature of influencer marketing. Everything feels organic even when it's not. Prime example being Justine Snack's butterboard video, which I discussed in the Aubrey Plaza Got Milk video, as well as the Girl Dinner video from a couple years years ago, but I was really curious about the potential connection between the beef industry and influencers, so I did a ton of digging. I went full tab golem mode. I found many mentions of influencer partnerships on the Cattlemen's Beef Board site, which is the beef checkoff website, but was having trouble finding like specific examples. I did end up finding a few, which I'll discuss in a moment, but one of the most interesting and damning things I found on the Beef Board site is this article written in 2022 by the co-chair of domestic marketing for the Cattlemen's Beef Board titled "The Beef Expert Network: How the Checkoff Uses Influencer Marketing." So remember the Dairy Checkoff and the Dairy Dream Team? Well, the Beef Expert Network sounds like the Beef Checkoff's version of that. And here's a passage I found particularly interesting. Influencers are individuals with perceived expertise or knowledge about certain topics and a decent online following. Their followers view them as trustworthy experts in their fields, and they often have significant power over their audience's purchasing decisions. Their recommendations can help brands expand their reach and messages. So sure, all of this is true, but the words that really stood out to me were perceived expertise or knowledge, and their followers view them as trustworthy. i.e., it doesn't really matter if they have expertise or knowledge or if they actually are trustworthy, as long as their followers perceive and view them to be so. And this could get into a larger conversation about the ethics of influencer marketing, which brings me to today's sponsor. I'm just kidding. Can you imagine? So I just thought that word choice was interesting, and in my opinion, it highlights how the power of that trust could get abused. The article goes on to claim there are 22 people in the Beef Expert Network, but doesn't state who they are. I was able to find another article that named at least 2. Some are even celebrity chefs, like Hugh Acheson, judge on the popular TV show Top Chef, and Josh Capon, chef and TV personality on the show Frankenfood. From what I can tell, Hugh Acheson did recipe videos on the Beef It's What's for Dinner YouTube channel, and Josh Capon did this segment on Good Morning America in 2023, where he makes his signature beef nachos and says this in the video.
So today, beef, it's what's for dinner, it's also for tailgating, and it's also for nachos.
So it's kind of sneaky marketing, because he does say the phrase beef, it's what's for dinner, but I don't think the average viewer would put together that like, oh, this whole segment is an ad, essentially. And if you notice, when he says it, the hosts and people off camera start laughing.
Beef, it's what's for dinner, it's also for tailgating, and it's also...
Like they think he's just jokingly referencing some slogan from the early 90s, not realizing that it's very much still a thing. I think this type of marketing should have to be so abundantly clear, like, this next segment is brought to you by the Cattlemen's Beef Board, but clearly it doesn't. But speaking of transparency, let's move on to an influencer who definitely has a partnership with the Beef Checkoff. I found this article on the Iowa Beef Industry Council website, which is Iowa's Checkoff program. Just a reminder for animal agriculture, there is the National Checkoff program, and then each state has its own, so this is Iowa's. The article is called How Your Checkoff Dollars Create Trust Through Influencer Marketing, and it's from January 7th, 2025, so very recent. In this article, they name one of their influencer partners, Lauren Grant, who goes by Zestful Kitchen. Just a side note, I found the name of this account interesting. There are a few different definitions of the word zest, but the primary one is relating to food and has to do with the peel of a citrus fruit, such as an orange or lemon, used as flavoring. So, you know, not really something you can get from meat, but anyway, I went to Lauren's Reels and was able to find quite a few that seemed to be in partnership with the Iowa Beef Council, but are not tagged as ads. In this one from a week ago, she tags them, but in a way that obfuscates the nature of their connection. FTC guidelines would require it to say hashtag ad or hashtag sponsored and have the paid partnership label. But again, do checkoff programs get special rules because they're partially funded by the government? I don't know for sure. There's another one where she said the Iowa Beef Council, quote, supported the development of this recipe, but what does that actually mean? There's another one where she tags them, but in a very vague way. And there's another one with no tag at all, but that seems very suspicious. Now, it wasn't hard for me to find these posts because most of the beef recipes she has made seem to be in partnership with the Iowa Beef Council. Take from that what you will. And one of the most disturbing things that the Iowa Beef Council article says is, what's particularly noteworthy about this collaboration is its impact on diverse audiences. While many of Lauren's followers initially followed plant-forward diets, her authentic enthusiasm for beef recipes has helped shift perceptions. Comments on her posts frequently show followers expressing newfound interest in incorporating beef into their meal planning. So we have proof that they're deliberately using Lauren's followers' trust in her to win over that audience's trust for themselves. And again, that's how influencer partnerships work, but something about them celebrating winning over former plant-forward consumers obviously gives me the ick. I actually wasn't able to find any of these comments due to the spamming of beef and beef please engagement farmed comments that every influencer seems to be doing now, but sure, I'll trust that they exist. I was able to find a few other partnerships seemingly with the National Beef Checkoff through poking around on Instagram, and these ones were better disclosed. So we know for sure that the Beef Checkoff partners with influencers. Unfortunately, we don't have a ton of transparency on who they are. And also, this is just the Beef Checkoff, so it would just be for beef itself. It wouldn't be for tallow. So is there a connection between the beef industry at large and tallow producers and influencers? Possibly, and I'd say likely, but it's hard to find evidence of that as of now. I did find this evidence of a tallow bomb sponsoring a birth conference in Canada though, so there's that. And I guess people really do rub it on their pregnant bellies. Back to the article. The politicization of food and ingredients is influencing the animal-based trend even more, says Fiona Harkin, Director of Foresight at strategic foresight consultancy The Future Laboratory. There's kind of a brute masculinity that's pervading our political social air right now that is embodied by red meat eating being seen as patriotic, for example. There's a connection here. The distrust in modern institutions leads to a desire for natural and unprocessed consumption, which leads to the pendulum swinging away from vegan alternatives. Again, each animal agriculture industry is an institution, bolstered by the US government, which is also an institution. And again, like I said before, vegan food products can be natural and unprocessed too. I've seen so many people online praise tallow for being natural and only one ingredient, and to that I'd say, so is rosehip oil, so is jojoba oil, so is squalene oil, so is shea butter. I could go on and on until the cows come home, but unfortunately they're currently being processed for their tallow. The article then goes on to examine what the future could look like for vegan beauty and fashion brands. Regardless of the growing interest in animal-based products, there's still a place for vegan beauty brands. In fact, the vegan cosmetics market is forecasted to expand at a compound annual growth rate of 6.3%. For many consumers, veganism is an ideology, not a trend. Vegan wellness has become synonymous with environmentalism, sustainability, and cruelty-free lifestyles. Many consumers are motivated by concerns about the environmental impact of animal agriculture and welfare. These concerns are likely to remain strong even as interest in animal products grows, says Dr. Noel Solish, dermatologist at skincare brand Indeed Labs. Some vegan brands say they aren't fazed by the growing animal product trend, nor the potentially political waters on the horizon, given that their business purposes are rooted in core ideologies. Like with beauty, consumers have become disillusioned with vegan fashion alternatives. Concerns over heavy processing have grown, similar to plant-based meat alternatives, and consumers are increasingly aware of the role plastic plays in vegan leather alternatives. Content creator and author Andrea Chong says, consumers' perceptions of animal leather have actually improved because all of the alternatives have proved themselves to not be of value, especially not of long-term value when you factor in durability and the fact nobody knows how they're going to wear down. The leather conversation is extremely frustrating to me for multiple reasons. Because animal leather comes from a natural source, people tend to view it in a completely greenwashed way. It's like in their minds, people almost imagine the skin gets cut off a cow, shaped into a handbag or pair of shoes and sold to them. It's like they think leather is as natural and unprocessed as a piece of tree bark. But as many of us know, the leather tanning industry, aka the process the animal skin has to go through in order to be made into sellable leather, is one of the most polluting industries in the world in terms of water, air, and soil pollution. And in terms of wear, yes, I have purchased some vegan leather products that have not worn very well. I've also had leather products products that haven't worn well. Many car companies are actually switching to synthetic leather, even in their higher end models, because leather seats in cars notoriously don't wear well over time. And now there are an increasing number of plant leather alternatives made from natural materials like cactus, apple, pineapple. Am I the only one that gets hungry anytime they talk about plant leathers? Like apple, pineapple? It just sounds delicious. My point is that classic argument that vegan leather is just plastic is rapidly approaching its expiration date. And plant leather products have seemed to pretty quickly come down to reasonable, at least cow leather comparable price points. In 2024, the luxury leather goods market is worth $81.9 billion, according to Euromonitor, and is forecasted to reach $96.4 billion by 2026. Euromonitor's Voice of the Industry survey shows that less than half of those working across apparel and footwear say their employers plan to introduce vegan and vegetarian claims in the next 5 years. An industry insider in the sustainability space says, "We aren't surprised to see this shift in the market and expected that the animal products industry would work to claw back customers after a recent boom in alternative materials. As investors in innovation, we recognize this push and pull as part of a natural cycle for progress in any industry." They then talked to the owner of the PETA-approved vegan handbag brand Mashu, who is vegan herself and says she would be willing to explore lab-grown leather alternatives from an ethical point of view, but that she wouldn't be sure how to market the material given it's not technically vegan. Mashu launched in 2017 and has experimented with plant-based leather alternatives, including pineapple-based Piñatex, corn and recycled polyester leather alternative BioVeg, apple leather Appeal, and olive leather Oleatex. Ooh, getting hungry again. I had never heard of this particular brand, but the bags are stunning and yes, a bit pricey, but seem to be very high quality. Despite the anti-vegan sentiment, the brand hasn't seen a negative impact directly on its business. When we started the brand, a lot of people were telling me not to market it as vegan because that would alienate consumers, says the founder, adding that she went against this advice because she wanted consumers to know the brand's values. These animal product trends don't alienate our current customer or change our customer acquisition strategy, but it does make us feel like we need to make our vegan brand pillar more visible to try and contribute to the counter-argument of trends like these, adds their lead marketing strategist. Our strategy is to make the fact that Mashu is vegan even louder among the wave of animal product hype. I find this steadfast attitude and approach so refreshing in a sea of constantly pivot to whatever the latest trend is approaches to marketing. Like, yeah, we're just gonna keep doing our thing. No worries. The article ends with this quote from Mashu's founder: "Ultimately, it's about empowering consumers to stick to their values despite the environment of disillusionment and fear. We've put so much of the blame for climate change on big industries, which is true, but it's sort of removed the responsibility on the consumer. People are thinking, well, what can I do? They're just going to keep producing this, so even if I stop buying the product, it won't make a difference. There's a lot of information out there that is making consumers confused, but if we have the say with our money, it does make a real difference." I appreciate that this piece ended with this feeling of hope and spotlighting the vegan business owners and their confidence about the future and their unflappability. Because at the end of the day, isn't that what being vegan is? Being morally unflappable, sticking with your convictions even when the trend winds change, even when it's not currently considered cool. Having that conviction in what you believe in and the bravery to live in accordance with that, I think that makes a person cooler than following a TikTok trend ever could. To wrap this up, wellness and diet culture do tend to be pendulums that swing back and forth, and we unfortunately seem to be nationally in a very animal ag focused time, but that's not to say that we're not also in many ways in a vegan focused time. Sure, there's lots of influencers promoting beef tallow and raw milk. There's also super popular vegan influencers of all kinds promoting vegan food, skincare, vegan ideals, etc. We do know that social media amplifies everything. Vegan ideals, vegan food, vegan products, and also animal ag-centric versions of all those things. But like with dairy promotion, what really concerns me is the lack of transparency the beef industry is afforded by their connection with the government, and the fact that so many people, in trying to avoid these institutions they distrust, are being taken on a ride by those very same institutions. For me, sometimes I feel like my veganism and my passion for the animals is one of the only things in my life I can predictably rely on. And it feels good to know that I'm therefore not going to get jerked around by trends and marketing and whatever the fad of the month is. And if I feel this way, I have no doubt that countless others do too. So in conclusion, again, no, I do not believe that wellness or carnivore wellness has canceled veganism or ever will. Those are my thoughts. I'd love to hear yours. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, found it insightful, and consider subscribing if you're not already. We're on the road to 10,000 subscribers, which is very exciting. And if you'd like even more content from me, you can head over to Patreon. You get Discord access at every level. Dinner Forks and Up get 2 pieces of exclusive content per month, 1 podcast episode, and 1 video or live stream. A very special thank you to my fancy forks, Claudia, Dindin Masker, and Big Chungus 4526. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!